Yes, the committee did touch on that. I believe in one of the objectives there, or strategies, they requested or call for cooperation in the management of the resource itself, management and conservation, not only within the FSM, but in cooperation with our neighboring countries and at international level.
Governor report.
I do not have a copy of the committee report, so I must apologize if I'm repeating something that you may already have in your report. But my question is whether or not the committee had ever discussed.
You are now listening to the Lieutenant Governor of Yap State, Lieutenant Governor of Yap State.
Industries that we have in the nation to evaluate what the problems are or what the progresses are, and then maybe rectify the problems and maybe build on the progresses that the existing industries have made.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The committee did consider that issue. I believe they wanted as a strategy to call all the involved people from the states, including the private sector, to come together to evaluate and then set policies and goals for future development in that sector.
I think what the Lieutenant Governor is referring to specifically are the various projects or joint ventures that we have throughout the nation, YFC, CFC, Westpac, and other NFC fishing ventures or joint ventures that are currently in operation and maybe currently facing problems. So in order to move forward, we have to understand the problems currently being faced by these ventures and possibly identify possible solutions that are needed to rectify the problems. And these are very critical because these are existing operations. And if we do not solve the problems, there goes our fisheries sector.
Thank you, Chairman, for clarifying the question. Now, the committee did not talk on that, but I might point out that there is one report already available right now. That task was done, I believe, just last summer, this June, and there's a copy of that report available, probably through the Department of R&D, which does just what you're asking.
May I ask the President of NFC to comment, if he has additional comment pertaining to the issue?
The next speaker would be Peter Sitan. Is the President of the National Fisheries Corporation, which is made up of representatives from the various states in the FSM.
Coordination effort is a real problem in itself. NFC, of course, know what we're doing, as the companies we invested in, but other states have their own investment, and we don't know the detail. I think what the Lieutenant Governor pointed out, we need to do that, to really evaluate what do we have, and so we don't duplicate. Perhaps we can help each other. I think it's a very valid point, and we should focus on it. And I think that's one of the strategies to answer the question.
Well, I know that NFC is partner in all of these, or most of these ventures, so we should be well informed, right? Any other, Mr. Rosario.
just wanted to render some solutions to the questions that were posted earlier. Number one, regarding the fishing boat that is rusting away at the dock. I think the best solution is to tow it out and sink it in the open ocean. It will take more money to refit that boat, and it will not be economical.
Your present speaker is Marcos Rosario, who is chairman of the Pohnpei State Economic Development Authority, or EDA. Marcos Rosario.
I think the solution is to establish a Bersainer base on each of the 4 states. In that way, we can attract the Bersainers, and maybe it will be less expensive for them to take all the fish and sell it in the States. Now maybe we can use that fish for animal feed or anything of that sort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So Moses, do you have any, Ratio, did you raise your hand earlier?
Yes. On looking at objective 9, I see perhaps the then could be eliminated and be used as part of the strategies under objective number 1. That's the same thing. Objective number 9, the effort that is suggested here is the ongoing mechanism at the efforts of government. The review process and all that, that is being done. So there is perhaps no need to include that and write papers on that. I think the overall issue, I don't know where it is contained in the report, but there is existing intergovernmental disagreement on policy with respect to distribution and division of resources gained from fisheries laws, etc. Perhaps the conference is a good forum to air the complaints that have been raised by the various states and the private sectors on the present attitude and management of those things. I did not see that contained anywhere except with respect to joint intergovernmental mechanisms in enforcements and so forth. Perhaps a clear policy statement or a statement of policy reform should be mandated to the committee to perhaps see the necessity for drafting for final consideration. And finally, my concern in some of the strategies that perhaps they do not really work into the objective so determined. An example of which would be the numerous suggestions of grading organizational setups that in the end would be counterproductive to some of the objectives we're aiming to accomplish either in this sector or in the other sectors of minimizing government and making things more cost-effective and affordable. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And that was former Governor, Pohnpei Governor Racio Moses.
So those comments could be incorporated, no objection, to the report as amendments or additions. Okay. Speaker Fritz.
The Honorable Jack Fritz, Speaker of Congress, the FSM, is our next individual, a person who is posing the question.
2 years to maximize receiving the benefits from our marine resources area. And the Vice President's questions perhaps implies what we really wanted to do is that to own that $200 million ourselves. This will take time to develop fishing industries like these foreign fleets are doing, and we probably cannot do it within this period in which we have some guarantee fundings. So, do you ever think about this possibility if we just meet with 1 or 2 fishing fleets and say, look, here is our fishing waters. You're the only one who will be allowed to fish here. Nobody else. Catch this much. you get 60% of this catch, we get 40% of it. That will definitely be more than the 20% you're talking about. Now that may be a little bit too radical, but is it possible? Could it be possible? Either in the percenter areas or in the long-lining sections.
So may I ask, MMA, I know they've been negotiating with those boats for the last couple of years, so you could probably better address the question.
That's quite a very difficult question to answer, but I'll try to comment on the experiences of the MMA.
Eugene Pangilinan, Deputy Executive Secretary of the what is known as MMA, Micronesian Maritime Authority.
Theirs is for economic gain as well. But that's where the common thing is there. If we are to negotiate deals such as that, it's possible, depending on the company that we're dealing with, what the perspectives are, on whether it's short-term, long-term. Like I said, please excuse me if I stop, because that is a very difficult question. I guess my perspective on this is we could achieve it if we all try to go out and find fishing companies that are willing to agree to such kinds of deals. However, we have to look also at our obligations under the Law of the Sea Convention, which is this zone is not given to us just for economic gains, but it is also to share it with the world. We have obligations to share with the world the amount of resources that are available out there that we do not have the capacity. So that is one way of doing it, is to negotiate and try to see if it's economical for both parties. I don't think I quite really answered the question, but that was quite a very difficult one.
I mean, I understand the Law of the Sea requirement which our friend is alluding to, but we are not closing our zones to the fishing fleets. They can come and fish with this kind of terms in mind, knowing that, it's only fair. Just like you cannot go in and mine the oil somewhere and say, look, you get 5% of this and I get 95% of it. And I think we've been perhaps criticized by other countries in that we are not really maximizing these resources, which is ours. I don't know whether the MMA is not bold enough in dealing with these issues, or they're just happy with the friends that they have out there. I'm trying to steer them up so that perhaps they could, instead of just accepting the status quo, be a little bit more daring, explore ideas, create some new ones, some new strategies to maximize it, because even with all of these strategies you put down here, I can much conclude that we may increase a little bit, but we will never get at least 30% of that value which the Vice President alluded to within the next 5 or 10 years. And there are only a few fishing grounds around. Us, Kiribati, and PNG are the most important one in this region. We do have the Nauru arrangement, which is supposed to be what our friends there was referring to, like the OPEC cartel. Somehow it doesn't work. I don't know why. That's for you technicians to figure out what went wrong. You follow that up with the Palau Agreement. It's the same concept, but it's not working. Why? I think the policies are there, and perhaps we just get out-negotiated by the foreign fleets. And because we are soft. And that's why sometimes the Congress simply say no when we disagree with the fees that they are proposing to give us. People cry foul, we are losing revenues, but it makes it difficult for us to continue accepting agreements when we don't get a fair share of our own resources.
like to clarify whether you're suggesting 40% of the net.
Although his back is facing you on the TV monitor, the speaker now is Timakio Hesa, who introduced the discussions on marine resources earlier. Timakio Hesa is from Pohnpei State.
Value of the fish sold in Japan, because most of the time the cost of operation is more than 70%. Thank you.
I just threw that figure up, but there is a point where parties would break up on arrangements. And if you can find a figure, whether 40, 35, 25, that's for you folks to play with and decide.
There's been a policy of this nation regarding the benefits of our resources, marine resources, and of course we all know that that policy is to maximize the stream of benefits from our resources, which is most abundant marine resources. As to how we achieve that, could be either by we do it ourselves 100%, or we jointly do it with other people like these foreign fishing ventures, or we continue doing what we are doing, collect fees. So I guess it is a matter of decision as to how we achieve that objective, maximization of benefits. And has been expressed by the committee, one of the objectives here is, I guess, to increase the number of locally owned boats up to that, whatever, 20%, so that we can...
Ladies and gentlemen, as this summit is talking fisheries and everything, the foreign aircraft has just arrived and flew over us to pick up a supply of fish caught in these waters.
From here on out. At the same time, the idea of increasing more percentage of our fees, like as proposed by Speaker Fritz, could also be considered. Of course, notwithstanding the other possible problems that may be faced, like as expressed by the Deputy Director of MMA and my friend here from the private sector. But these are issues that we need to carefully look at. Mr. Sidan?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the Vice President from the bank and Resi Moses mentioned something that...
Once again, you are listening to Mr. Peter Sidan, President of the National Fisheries Corporation.
But to me, it's not there. That is a clear policy of our fisheries resources. We talk about what's on the book in Title 24. I don't know that that's the policy. We talk about other reports other people made. We have yet to get an official policy so we can move under that policy. Maybe perhaps that's why we keep going around and ask, why are you not doing this? Perhaps this meeting should endorse a policy. You say that the policy of this country is maximize benefit. I don't think it ever been officially stated or adopted by leaders of this country.
Well, maybe it's about time we discuss it now and adopt it so that you guys won't have any excuses.
Mr. Chairman.
Speaker?
I don't know where our friend Peter Sidan is, what does he need in terms of looking for a policy. Policies are usually provided in laws, and the laws are quite clear on that. And that's Title 24, and the one that also created the NFC. Perhaps maybe you're ill-suited. You want to do things which you want to do, but we're not authorizing you to do. We can maybe fix that, but you have to let us know. But the general policy in the fisheries areas are provided in Title 24, and they're general enough what Ed Miles wrote down, these things about maximizing the streams of benefits, it's just a consultant repeating the same thing, getting $25,000 for the same thing with its in a different way, but it's all in there. And we can improve on that, but the policy is there.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just, I don't want to debate it, but of course NFC is working under the law that created NFC. But I'm trying to say that we coordinated all of our efforts, not only NFC, but everybody, under a guided policy. Title 24 is only Title 24. I think that's what I mean. Sorry if I keep raising this, but from my time with MMA, I raise it. My time with NFC, I keep raising it. Perhaps, whenever consultants come in from the outside, that's what they ask. What's your policy? And they go to MMA give them a policy. They go to NFC give them a policy. They go to other private sector or other people, they give them another code. I think we need to define one that everybody work under.
Mr. Palik?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment is not on policy. Let me address the point made.
The present speaker is Aaron Palik of the Bank of FSM.
He talks about the maximization of rent from marine resources. I to some extent, I agree that we may be looking at very complicated aspect of this. How do we maximize rent from marine resources? I think it's given that whatever best deal we can negotiate, whatever total output is there, then we're fighting over what's caught or what the value of the catch. I think we sometimes overlook the importance of having to train our own people on the technical knowledge and capability of negotiating contracts with outsiders, outside businesses who know their business so well. We get assistance from outside to negotiate contracts. I guess my point is sometimes we may be looking at too complicated an issue, but paying attention to little things like, do we develop our own people to be able to negotiate this sophisticated contract with the objective of maximizing our rent or return from these marine resources? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who raised his hand? Yeah, Mr. Rosario?
Yeah, my point was already addressed by the gentleman, but I just want to bring up the fact that while we sit here and talk about maximizing our benefits from fisheries, most of the boats that are operating in our region are transshipping in Guam. And right now we have
Once again, Mr. Marcus Rosario, Chairman of Pohnpei State EDA.
hundreds of boats in Guam. I think the major reason is because they have an open port policy, and that attracted many of the fishing boats to transship in Guam. I think the question here is what is our plan? How much fees are we going to charge the fishing boats? And how are we going to attract them to transshipment in the FSM states? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
May I ask the MMA Deputy Director to address the issue?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The vessels that are transiting out of Guam, a majority of them are Japanese, and a lot of them also are Taiwanese. But the FSM does have a clear-cut policy, excuse me, not the FSM, but the MMA, and that is vessels that are licensed to fish in the FSM.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Eugene Pangilinan, Deputy Executive Secretary of MMA, FSM?
They have a very big fleet operation. We have a problem with Japan as well because of their own internal requirements or policies preventing vessels from transshipping here. But we recently broke that policy and allowed for some of the Japanese vessels to transship here. But we are not at a stage that we can accommodate every single fishing vessel operating in the region. Otherwise, we would have more problems than we would have right now. Our ports can only accommodate a certain number of vessels, and we should try to keep pace with the level of the number of vessels that can operate here. The Taiwanese vessels that are transshipping in Guam are vessels that are fishing in the high seas in other exclusive economic zones that they have access to. How do we get them to come and transship here? There is also another preventing measure within Title 24, which calls for that defines transshipping as well as fishing. So, as Mr. Rosario pointed out, we could address that by changing the law very easily. But that opens our doors to all the fishing vessels operating in the zone or outside of on the high seas. But we have to look at our ports. Can we handle those number of boats? Thank you.
Thank you, Chin. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
As an outsider, I shouldn't get too involved in controversial
His Excellency Perry Head, Australian Ambassador to the FSM.
I wanted to make a comment about make a general comment about the access fees and the idea of getting 40%, 60%, which is the idea of increasing the return to national governments is, of course, desirable and a good objective. Foreign fishing vessels, foreign fishing operators are inherently untrustworthy, whichever country they come from. That's a problem. Whatever sort of access arrangements you have, they have to encourage foreign fleets to be truthful about what they're doing. I would be worried if you entered into an arrangement with an operator on the basis of 40-60 split. You'd probably end up with less than you're getting now, and you'd spend years arguing. You'd spend years arguing with them, trying to prove the opposite. If I could, in the South Pacific Forum, there's been an objective for several years to try and get countries working together to increase the net return from the South Pacific fishery. The tuna fishery is worth in excess of $1 billion. It's one of the last great fisheries in the world, as other speakers have said. At the present time, the return to the countries in the region is somewhere around 5%. An objective of the forum has to be increase that return to something around 8%. Now, to do that, it's going to require countries to work together. It doesn't mean that countries don't have individual policies. It doesn't mean that some countries are more important than others, because they clearly are, and FSM is one of the most important fishing nations in the South Pacific. But some of the base conditions under which you go out and negotiate with the foreign nations have to be talked about with other countries, because otherwise, as is happening with transshipping, you can have one set of regulations in FSM and all the boats will go to Palau, or all the boats will go to Guam. So there have to be some sort of coordination and standardisation and agreement about these national objectives. And I think that in fact there's a great deal of commonality in the objectives of all countries in the South Pacific, and that is to maximise the returns. How it's done is an extremely complicated matter. It requires a lot of patience, but it also requires people to work together, and not just at the international level, and to which I'm more familiar with the Foreign Fisheries Agency and with the South Pacific Commission involved in stock assessment. But also at the national level, it's also very important that people do share objectives, so that surveillance and monitoring and inshore and nearshore and offshore and the private sector and the government sector and about the 25 different agencies here and the probably 150 that would be existing in Australia are working to a common purpose. So I endorse, the debate that's going on here today reflects the debate that's going on everywhere in the region, and it's a very healthy one. And there is income to be made in excess of what is currently being made, and it's an important area to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other additional comments?
It is noteworthy to note that the Australian ambassador to the FSM is actually participating in these discussions in assistance of making policies.
This policy, I hereby suggest that it is going to be made at this meeting, and it will be made as part of the fisheries report, that the national fisheries policy is to maximize the stream of economic benefits from this important resource, marine resources. Any comments or objection? If none, it is hereby added to the report as a policy. Yes, Mr. Vice President.
I'd like to make a comment on an observation. I think the nature of our discussion here has proven that we are not focusing on specific directions on our fishery development. And it is also evident in our discussion that everyone is interested in maximizing the benefit of the sea. I think what we should be addressing at this point, when the Congress, MMA, NFC, and even myself ask questions, I think most of the states are looking at us and asking why we're asking this kind of questions when we are expected to direct the development of the fishery programs and make it a positive contributing revenue to the overall economy. I think it does prove that we need to continue to scrutinize more on how we could make it a positive move to maximize.
Although the background in the video may be dark, you are listening to, on the left, Vice President Jacob Mena, and sitting next to him is Speaker Jack Fritz.
Bring us all together again to address that particular issue, whether we would like to narrow down the participants of the fishing companies in our ocean and maximize the benefit we're receiving, or whether we start renegotiating all over, or whether we try to own the fishing fleets. I think we need to address those specific areas, but I move that we adopt the report now, and possibly in the implementation discussion, we could go further into how to do that.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, that is a good suggestion. Just to be clarified, the policy that was discussed to maximize the stream of benefits from our resources, that entails more than licensing. It includes infrastructure, support of our own local industry, fisheries industries, and other fisheries development which would result in this objective. So it is not only the maximization of license fees from the foreign fishing fleet, but also to encourage local development in fisheries. So I guess that is a very broad policy under which the other activities under fisheries can fall, including increasing the fees. Any other last comments, suggestions? So if none, yes.
This is not comment on the report, but I like to
Isonan kan Ilan Joseph.
Include an important subject matter that needs to be discussed so that it could be incorporated into the draft communique to be drafted sometimes between lunchtime and the next time we will convene this afternoon. Very important subject is the implementation of this, whatever recommendation that will be coming out of this conference. As we have stated earlier, beginning of this conference on Monday, we wish to make this a different meeting, different than any other meetings we have had in the past 15 or 16 years. by making it more implementable, that is, trying to carry over or follow through on whatever recommendations, decisions that will be made at this conference. Otherwise, it is just going to be another conference, and we're going to have another one and another one. So at this time, I'd like to open the discussion for ways and means to address the issue of implementation, so that it could be incorporated as part of the report. And that is going to be a very important decision on top of the reports or recommendations. So may I ask my good Vice President to lead the discussion.
You know, I always say that there are at least two kinds of fishermen. One that catches the fish in the ocean, and the other one is the one buying the fish from the market. But we all talk about it. I think I would like to propose that in the marine resources, I do not know if this conference at the setup now will be able to address the detailed needs of the fishery programs. I wonder if the different states could indicate whether we could address some of the possible implementations on fishery programs and share problems, or whether we should go into a smaller group to make it possible to address and discuss those issues. I think the strategies are and the objectives in the report are very good outlines of what should be known and pursued. But how do we actually implement them is the question.
Yes, that is the big question. So, Lieutenant Governor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman.
Garrison Jackson, Lieutenant Governor of Koshai.
My understanding was that the reports from the priority areas will be incorporated into a joint communique. And the communique will put forth policy direction for the FSM. And in this same document, directions and policy, what have you, will have to be attached to these the priority areas. And as far as our delegation is concerned, we're hoping that this will be properly reflected in the communique, and that this will not be too restrictive because of the nature of the different programs, say in agriculture and fisheries, and even commerce and industry, and even health services and education in the 4 states. So there is a need to further define the goals and objective of the different areas. As we just discovered in the fisheries sector, even if there are statements of policy and direction, there is a need to further define, redefine, and make it more clear-cut on as to So I would suggest that maybe in the communique that general statements are made to address the current situation and where we want to go from here in each of these areas. And then responsibilities of who coordinate and who lend support for maybe coming up with a policy for each of this. And then maybe timelines are also set down in the communique, as you correctly indicated, we also would like to see this as a different get-together. That is something that we see as, if we don't do it right this time, then our future will be in jeopardy. So we would hope that timelines and roles of the national government and maybe the state and maybe the NGOs and even the private sectors can be clearly put forward and identified with the timelines that will have to be identified here too. Good Lord, Chairman.
Senator George.
Senator Joshua George of Kosai is now speaking.
I may be wrong, but I was under the impression that the communique will be just a very broad statement making some political decision and commitment for what we are trying to do here. And hopefully the technical people or the impact group can help us in reviewing the reports that have been submitted by different groups to develop perhaps a program of actions that would enable us to move forward from what has been adopted as the strategies, for each of the sectors that we have been discussing. Thank you.
Okay. May I ask Chris if he has comments?
I'd like to make a couple of suggestions for you to think about and talk about, and hopefully...
The next speaker is Chris Lightfoot, team leader of the MPAT team.
For the implementation process. One idea that we've had, and you've heard mentioned several times, is some sort of economic council. Now what we have in mind in that is a peak body, a body that's headed by the most senior people. A fairly small group who are principally concerned with the economic development areas. I suspect the best idea would be something that's cross-executive, cross-legislature. I must say, I think somehow or other the state linkage has to be created, and I don't have any brilliant ideas on how to do that. You people are far more likely to be able to come up with a good idea on that than I am. But the second leg of the implementation, which is crucial, and I go back to the leadership conferences when I say this. I've looked through the results of all the leadership conferences, and policies and programs, etc., that have come out have almost universally been good, sensible, logical, correct, but the actual implementation, as you all realise, has been missing. So I think what we need to do is, if we create a council, or whatever we call it, it needs to have a technical secretariat who are just dedicated to supporting it. And I don't mean secretaries or typists. I mean people who can actually analyse whether projects and programs are meeting our policies and strategies, and can even go a step further and recommend that certain policies and projects should be addressed or implemented. Now, if we can create a council which has a high-level leadership as its as its members, it's going to be very hard for the executive or the legislatures to second-guess its recommendations. And if we can give it the support of a sound technical secretariat, its decisions should be that much better, and people should be able to make those decisions with that much more confidence. So that's what I'd like you to consider and possibly discuss, and possibly come up with I'm sure you can come up with a better structure than I've been able to think of, but they're the issues I think we could start off thinking about right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction or comments to what has been said? Lieutenant Governor?
I would agree fully to the proposed scenario here. as long as we don't build another layer of bureaucracy here, because we're known to be very bureaucratic. And maybe Chris should expound further on this, because I thought we already have the departments and the agencies in place. We even have the FDA and the IDF and even a review committee up at the national government. What are the relationships here? Thank you.
This is nothing innovative in my thinking. I'm just building on some models that I've seen work elsewhere. And basically the way I envisage it functioning is not really any new people involved in it, but having a core group supporting the Secretariat, maybe 2 or 3 people, that's all. But when it comes to the technical review of projects and programs, they go out to all the different agencies who have that technical capacity, whether they're state, national or even private sector, and get the input they need to help them formulate the recommendations which go forward to the Council. Now clearly this Secretariat could not, it's an executive agency, it's an executive operation, it's not a policy operation, so clearly it couldn't stop projects and programs being put to the Council. But if all projects and programs that go through the Council are at least analysed and evaluated thoroughly before they go there, the decision makers are in a far, far better position to make decisions that will carry the process forward. And as I go back to the leadership conferences, I've tried to find how that mechanism has worked. Clearly it hasn't worked and it hasn't been there. So I think there is this need for this coordination at that level. And that's why I think this Secretariat should be dedicated to serving that Council. Does that explain it? I'm not actually talking about a new layer in the bureaucracy. I'm talking about coordinating the efforts of the bureaucracy a bit better, but having people dedicated to doing that, and technically sound people.
Perhaps we can do that down the road, but I think what we need to do right after this conference is for all of us to go back.
Our present speaker is
with our colleagues,
FSM National Speaker Jack Fritz.
or congressmen or senators, the chiefs, and discuss this, what we are doing here. First, make them understand the importance of this conference for them and for all of us. Talk to our constituents and educate them. And I think if they accept
So I would suggest that maybe in the communique that general statements are made to address this, the current situation and where we want to go from here in each of these areas. And then responsibilities of who coordinate and who support, lend support for maybe coming up with a policy for each of this. And then maybe timelines are also set down in the communique, as you correctly indicated. We also would like to see this at the different get-together. That is something that we see as, if we don't do it right this time, then our future will be in jeopardy. So we would hope that timelines and roles of the national government and maybe the state and maybe the NGOs and even the private sectors can be clearly put forward and identified with the timelines that will have to be identified here too. Good Lord, Chairman.
Senator George.
Senator Joshua George of Kosai is now speaking.
I may be wrong, but I was under the impression that the communique will be just a very broad statement making some political decision and commitment for what we are trying to do here. And hopefully the technical people or the impact group can help us in reviewing the reports that have been submitted by different groups to develop perhaps a program of actions that would enable us to move forward from what has been adopted as the strategies, for each of the sectors that we have been discussing. Thank you.
Okay. May I ask Chris if he has comments?
I'd like to make a couple of suggestions for you to think about and talk about, and hopefully...
The next speaker is Chris Lightfoot, team leader of the MPAT team.
For the implementation process. One idea that we've had, and you've heard mentioned several times, is some sort of economic council. Now what we have in mind in that is a peak body, a body that's headed by the most senior people. A fairly small group who are principally concerned with the economic development areas. I suspect the best idea would be something that's cross-executive, cross-legislature. I must say, I think somehow the state linkage has to be created, and I don't have any brilliant ideas on how to do that. You people are far more likely to be able to come up with a good idea on that than I am. But the second leg of the implementation, which is crucial, and I go back to the leadership conferences when I say this. I've looked through the results of all the leadership conferences, and policies and programs, etc., that have come out have almost universally been good, sensible, logical, correct, but the actual implementation, as you all realise, has been missing. So I think what we need to do is, if we create a council or whatever we call it, it needs to have a technical secretariat who are just dedicated to supporting it. And I don't mean secretaries or typists. I mean people who can actually analyse whether projects and programs are meeting our policies and strategies, and can even go a step further and recommend that certain policies and projects should be addressed or implemented. Now, if we can create a council which has a high-level leadership as its as its members, it's going to be very hard for the executive or the legislatures to second-guess its recommendations. And if we can give it the support of a sound technical secretariat, its decisions should be that much better, and people should be able to make those decisions with that much more confidence. So that's what I'd like you to consider and possibly discuss, and possibly come up with I'm sure you can come up with a better structure than I've been able to think of, but they're the issues I think we could start off thinking about right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction or comments to what has been said? Lieutenant Governor?
I would agree fully to the proposed scenario here, as long as we don't build another layer of bureaucracy here, because we're known to be very bureaucratic. And maybe Chris should expound further on this, because I thought we already have the departments and the agencies in place. We even have the FDA and the idea of even a review committee up at the national government. What are the relationships here? Thank you.
This is nothing innovative in my thinking. I'm just building on some models that I've seen work elsewhere. And basically the way I envisage it functioning is not really any new people involved in it, but having a core group supporting the Secretariat, maybe 2 or 3 people, that's all. But when it comes to the technical review of projects and programs, they go out to all the different agencies who have that technical capacity, whether they're state, national, or even private sector, and get the input they need to help them formulate the recommendations which go forward to the Council. Now clearly this Secretariat could not, it's an executive agency, it's an executive operation, it's not a policy operation, so clearly it couldn't stop projects and programs being put to the Council. But if all projects and programs that go through the Council are at least analysed and evaluated thoroughly before they go there, the decision makers are in a far, far better position to make decisions that will carry the process forward. And as I go back to the leadership conferences, I've tried to find how that mechanism has worked. Clearly it hasn't worked, and it hasn't been there. So I think there is this need for this coordination at that level, and that's why I think this Secretariat should be dedicated to serving that Council. Does that explain it? I'm not actually talking about a new layer in the bureaucracy. I'm talking about coordinating the efforts of the bureaucracy a bit better, but having people dedicated to doing that, and technically sound people.
Perhaps we can do that down the road, but I think what we need to do right after this conference is for all of us to go back
Our
to
present speaker is
with our colleagues,
FSM National Speaker Jack Fritz.
our congressmen or senators, the chiefs, and discuss this, what we are doing here. First, make them understand the importance of this conference for them and for all of us. Talk to our constituents and educate them. And I think if they accept those of us who are in the legislative areas, we get our clues, like everybody else's, from the public, but we have to educate them. And I think this is really the problem of our past decisions. We finish and that's it. There was no filtering down the line where the people will say, look, you went there, you spent this money, we agree that what you did there is important, not only for us now, but in the future. And I think if we do this, it's going to cost money, but if we're serious, just like what we did for the comeback of reassociation, we actually go out there in the village and explain to them the importance of the arrangement we propose to have with US. If you don't touch base with the local public, they are not supporting this activity. When it comes to allocating resources, and when they come to us and say, look, we need this more than those things, because they don't understand the importance of this exercise, it's not going to get the support. So I am asking all of us, really, especially the state people, because you own the radio stations, and sometimes you don't get to talk on your radios, to go down and make the program yourselves. Even through CBs, talk to the people and get them understand, appreciate what we are doing here. I think with their supports, I think we can move definitely ahead than in the past. And then we can do all the other tasks or commission to monitor. But we have to get that basic support first from the constituents, the general public.
Yes, I agree, you're completely correct. I think we could also extend that a little bit further and possibly limit what this conference comes out with to asking the President to actually work with the states and the Congress to devise a model that would work and would be satisfactory to everyone. And that the process of doing that will, of course, give time for your consultation back with the constituents, and give time for it to feed into the final solution. But I think we could reasonably expect to be able to make a final decision on something like this within a couple of months.
Chairman, I would hate to see us go back to filing the ideas that have been shared in this conference in papers and put it elsewhere. I think the participants have expressed their views on certain issues. And I think we should take it from there and expand it so that we take implementation actions. For example, if one of our immediate goal is to maximize the benefits of our marine resources, we have a system whereby the state government is to a certain extent autonomous in its operation. But there may be need to join efforts and resources by both the national government and the state government. But if the state is actually doing the fishery, what do they need the national government to do in order to expand on what they have now? In order to convert the losing proposition that we have to start making money. Should we decide to start implementing tomorrow what we are doing today, what should the national government look into? And what should the state government look into? If money was a problem, how should we ask Congress to look at it and perhaps appropriate certain amount for that purpose? I think the momentum is there after this conference. And now how do we avoid killing that feeling and continue to expand on that is my question.
Yeah, I think there is a definite need to keep it alive. We can maybe start off with the ad hoc committee, continue the review of the recommendations that have been made at this conference. At the same time, plan on this kind of consultation needed so that our constituents, our citizens out there can fully understand and realize the problems and the possible solutions that we're trying to recommend at this conference. So this could be incorporated in the communique and possibly discussed when we come back sometimes this afternoon, but I think we have already agreed on the need to implement, the need to continue the momentum. Mr. Rosario, did you raise your hand?
I think one of the noble thing about this summit,
Once again, for our viewers,
the fact that it is
you have
time for the national government
Mr. Rosario of the EDA Pohnpei State.
people. I think it is very simple that the national government should create the right atmosphere, right environment for development. And I mean to say, creating the right kind of policies, appropriating enough money, and so forth, that we at the state level can implement what has already been transpired in this summit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, did you raise your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to follow through on what you had said regarding...
The next speaker is Mr. Kangichi Welle, Director of Education of Chuk State.
Talking about, first of all, Mr. Chairman, I think what you're beginning to see here as a result of all of these sectors coming together, I think it's a very healthy one in that you're looking at it in a consolidated setup where communication may begin to proceed from that point. So I, as a suggestion, as you already suggested, I think we need to we continue looking at work in the future in consolidated planning approach. But I would like to suggest, as we are looking at future, not just by 2001, but beyond, perhaps maybe this summit may also look into supporting improvement of communication between our states and the municipal governments, as well as the nation. If we do have that, I think we can shorten the geographical problems that we now face by nature, as well as whatever else with respect to the spread that we are dealing with. Maybe invest in appropriate technology that would continue our dialogues on this thing. As I see that we're not just dealing with the problems in one shot or maybe twice a year, but it should be on a continual basis as much as possible in that context. Thank you, Chairman.
You and last comment before we adjourn, not adjourn but recess. I ask my friend Mr. Conrad if you have comments.
I was going to say before everybody started making comments to propose that perhaps the best solution to have an effective implementation scheme is to ask Congress or legislature to enact legislation. Maybe providing penalty provision in the legislation whereby people who don't abide by the law in the implementation of the policy will be subject to prosecution. However, when our consultant proposed to have some kind of economic council, then I switched my idea to that proposition. And also, I would like to share with you the expression of my colleague, Mr. Marcos Rosario. I do believe that our development ought to be agreed concurrently by national and state government. So in our implementation scheme or efforts, I would like to ask the national government officials, both executive, legislative, judiciary, to keep due consideration to the states concerned in the actual implementation of our policies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
So with that, we can continue the discussion when we reconvene on implementation. So with that, I'd like to adjourn now and go for lunch. But before we do that, I'd like to announce that the committee on the drafting the communique will become composed of all the chairmen of the committees, as well as myself and the co-chair, Secretary Annabelle, and the vice chairman or the technical staff of those committees if they wish, but they do not have to be there. It is not mandatory. However, it is mandatory for all the chairmen of the committees. And I guess the venue will be at the Pacific Skylight right now after this session. And the plenary will be reconvening at 3:30, during which time we'll be reviewing the draft communique to be drafted by this committee. Kalana.
So there you go, folks. The committee discussions have just been concluded with the marine resources and some discussion on implementation and implementing agencies, what so and so and so and so. We now break for lunch, at which time there will be a drafting committee consisting of the various chairmen of the committees and their vice chairman. This group is very important in that they will compile the recommendations of the last 4 days or 3.5 days in a draft situation and bring it back to the plenary session at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The plenary will then look at the draft communique, add in, throw out certain things, revise that, and hopefully come to a consensus on the broad policies that is a result of this discussion. And I understand that tomorrow, the last day of the summit, will be a formal presentation of the communique, followed by a closing session ceremony. I've been very privileged as an individual to participate in this summit, and I hope that my participation has been helpful to our listeners here in Pohnpei State. Unfortunately, I cannot focus my narration into Pohnpeian as this conference is in English and will be shared by all states in the nation. Hopefully at some other time we may be able to provide for our Pohnpei listeners a separate broadcast in Pohnpeian. I will now turn over the mic over to our good friend Dave Arthurs of Calvary Baptist Church, who has been donating his time voluntarily to this effort. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Welbacker. We are at Misco Restaurant at Misco Beach here in the northern tip of Pohnpei State for the first economic summit. This concludes our plenary session for this morning. We were in a discussion about marine resources and health. This has been concluded, and our next live broadcast will be this afternoon, approximately 3:30, when we continue on in a plenary session when the communique will be presented that will be adopted to take to Manila for the conference taking place there with the donor nations on December the 11th. So this concludes our broadcast for this hour from Misco Restaurant. This is Dave Arthurs having been with Mr. Berman Wellbacker, who's been introducing our speakers, as he recognizes most of these people, having been in politics for a number of years, been very beneficial to identify and let you know by radio that you cannot see these people, but he's been identifying them for us, that you might have a better idea of what is taking place. So this time we turn things back to the studio.